Thank you, Senator Klobuchar. No one should have to risk their life to cast their vote. That's why it's so important to have safe opportunities to allow Americans to participate in our democracy and to fulfill their right in November. Thankfully, in Illinois, my governor, J.B. Pritzker, recently signed legislation expanding safe voting opportunities for all Illinois voters. Under the new law, about 5 million voters with active registrations will automatically receive an application for vote by mail for the 2020 election. Voting by mail, voting safely at home, is a necessary option in the midst of a global pandemic that's already killed more than 126,000 Americans and a total of more than 500,000 around the world. Despite the deceptive and sometimes deceitful narrative being pushed by some, voting by mail is a secure option. As the Brennan Center for Justice explained in a recent analysis, and I quote, "Since the year 2000, more than 250 million votes have been cast through mail-out ballots in all 50 states, according to the Vote at Home Institute. Despite this dramatic increase in mail voting over time, fraud rates remain infinitesimally small. Infinitesimally small. However, some voters still prefer to vote in person. That's why it's important that states offer that option with safety procedures to protect them. Under the new law in our state, Illinoisans can vote in person if they wish. They can vote early as well. To protect voters and poll workers, the law requires all election authorities to comply with guidance from the Illinois Department of Public Health on early voting. Election authorities in Illinois also may establish curbside voting options. An election law will be designated a state holiday in 2020 to ensure more safe polling places will be available. Mr. President, why is it so hard for those who are legally entitled to vote in America? What does it say about a democracy when the key to that democracy, a vote by those legally entitled, is such a burden and hardship? These upgrades I've talked about are expensive. That's why the federal government needs to help. The CARES Act took a first step. I want to thank Senator Klobuchar for her role in including provisions that provided $400 million to help states prepare for the 2020 election cycle. Illinois received about $14 million. But another $3.6 billion is needed in the next package to help all states increase the ability to vote by mail, expand early voting and online registration, and increase the safety of voting in person. Mr. President, the President of the United States votes by mail. What does that tell us? Is he participating in a questionable political procedure? I don't think so. The House passed HEROES Act a few weeks ago. It had included money, and I'm committed to working with my colleagues to ensure those critical funds are included in any COVID-19 relief package that we may consider. I'm also proud to sponsor Senator Klobuchar's Natural Disaster and Emergency Ballot Act, which would also provide necessary funding safeguards to protect voters. I was disappointed to see my Republican friends block this important legislation on the floor this afternoon. In the middle of this global health crisis, Americans need to know what the federal government is doing, and they need to know that we're doing everything we can to ensure that voters will be able to have their voices heard at the ballot box in November. If you start with the premise that both political parties don't want anyone who is unentitled or cannot legally cast a vote to do so, you have to ask a basic question. Why does one major political party look for ways to delay, limit, and put hardships on voters, and the other believe that an expanded electorate reflects America and should be encouraged? Federal funding and guidance is clearly needed. Look at the chaos that we've seen in the last few weeks. Is this America when in Georgia, voters waited more than 6 hours to cast a ballot due to long lines and voting machine failures? Is this America in the state of Wisconsin when thousands of voters didn't receive their requested absentee ballots, leading voters to decide between casting a ballot and protecting their health? Last month, a state official said that 71 71 people were exposed and infected by COVID-19 after voting in person or working at the polls in Wisconsin during the primary election. And in Kentucky, we saw images of voters banging on the windows of Louisville's only polling location when the doors were locked after traffic at the site prevented a significant number from being able to get in line in time. These situations are appalling, unacceptable, and downright embarrassing in a democracy. It is time for us to come together and protect the fundamental right to vote, as well as the health and safety of all eligible Americans who seek to exercise it. Mr. President, I yield the floor.